Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for attending this press briefing. My name is Wayne Musabayana. I'm with the African Union Commission. Our panel this afternoon will be the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, and he's being joined by His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is going to be a very quick briefing, so we have to move with time. For the record, for those who are joining us online, this is the press briefing of the 8th African Union United Nations Annual Conference, and it is being held at the African Union Commission, the headquarters of the African Union. The way we will conduct this briefing, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat will start with a statement, 3 to 5 minutes, and he will hand over to His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations. After that, we will have 2 very quick questions from the media. Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, chers amis de la presse. Nous venons de clôturer les travaux de la 8e session du dialogue de haut niveau entre les Nations Unies et l'Union africaine. Il y a bientôt 8 ans, je prenais à peine mes fonctions que nous avions débattu, discuté et signé un accord cadre avec les Nations Unies sur les questions de paix et sécurité. Un an après, nous avions signé un autre accord cadre sur les questions de développement, notamment la mise en œuvre de 2 agendas, l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine et l'agenda 2030 des Nations Unies. Nous avons enfin, cette année même, signé un 3e accord cadre sur les questions de gouvernance et les questions des droits de l'homme. Les relations entre les Nations Unies et l'Union africaine se sont renforcées. Je pouvais le dire aujourd'hui, et je dirais avec beaucoup de fierté. Monsieur Antonio Guterres a été pour beaucoup dans ces renforcements du partenariat entre les Nations Unies et l'Union africaine. Ses convictions profondes, personnelles, certainement son expérience politique chez lui, mais également comme haut commissaire des Nations Unies pour les réfugiés, lui ont donné l'occasion de connaître l'Afrique de manière très proche, très intime. Et cette touche a trouvé une réponse également au niveau de l'Union africaine. Nous avons travaillé ensemble, qu'il s'agisse des questions de paix et de sécurité, et vous le savez, il n'en manque pas dans le continent africain. Qu'il s'agisse de développement, vous connaissez également la problématique aujourd'hui dans ce continent qui souffre du sous-développement, qui connaît des épidémies, qui connaît parfois de la famine, des inondations. Et il y a également les questions qui sont des défis pour ce continent, la gouvernance, les questions des droits de l'homme. Sur toutes ces questions, sans tabou, et travaillant vraiment de manière directe, de manière égale, nous avions travaillé pour améliorer la situation dans notre continent et contribuer ainsi à l'émergence d'un multilatéralisme de solidarité. Mon cher Antonio, moi je suis à 4 mois de la fin de ma mission à la tête de la Commission de l'Union africaine. Ça correspond bien et c'est l'occasion pour moi de te remercier personnellement, toi et tes équipes, notamment la vice-secrétaire générale, Amina Mohamed, les autres sous-secrétaires avec lesquels on a travaillé, Jean-Pierre, Madame Di Carlo, qui, ensemble avec les équipes, avec les commissaires de l'Union africaine, ont travaillé pour le renforcement de ce partenariat. Les États africains font partie des Nations Unies. Il en constitue plus du quart des États des Nations Unies. Et l'Afrique doit avoir toute sa place. Toute sa place. Ce n'est que justice. C'est pour cela que depuis des années, nous nous battons pour la réforme du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies. Quelques lueurs d'espoir apparaissent. Pour la réforme de la gouvernance mondiale dans son ensemble, il s'agisse de la réforme des institutions financières. Nous venons d'être admis comme membre du G20. C'est un pas également supplémentaire. Mais l'Afrique mérite mieux. Il faut qu'elle ait toute sa place parce qu'elle constitue démographiquement et économiquement, même si c'est encore en état potentiel, une force avec laquelle il faut devoir compter. La session que nous venons de terminer nous a permis de faire un bilan de ce que nous avons entrepris ensemble. Et surtout, de dégager des perspectives, je pourrais dire à la commission qui va venir, en tout cas le socle de ce partenariat est mis en place. Vivement qu'il soit consolidé pour l'intérêt de l'Afrique, pour l'intérêt des Nations Unies, pour l'intérêt de l'humanité, pour un multilatéralisme, je me répète, de solidarité et de justice. Merci une fois de plus d'avoir fait le déplacement. Nous avons eu des discussions, comme à l'habitude, très franches, qui nous ont permis d'avancer. Merci pour ton soutien.
Merci bien. Mesdames et messieurs les journalistes, vous allez permettre que, avant de faire aussi quelques commentaires sur nos travaux d'aujourd'hui, je puisse lire un petit texte que j'ai écrit moi-même avec mon cœur. Je voudrais dire quelques mots à l'encontre de mon cher collègue et ami Moussa Faki. Cher Moussa, depuis le début de nos mandats respectifs en 2017, nous avons parcouru un long chemin ensemble. Votre vision d'une Afrique intégrée, prospère et pacifique a toujours été en harmonie avec nos objectifs pour un monde plus juste, durable et digne. Votre leadership éclairé, votre capacité à rassembler et votre engagement infatigable pour le multilatéralisme représentent une source d'inspiration pour nous tous. Et votre sens du dialogue et grande expertise des enjeux globaux ont permis de faire entendre la voix de l'Afrique sur la scène internationale avec force et clarté. Vous avez été toujours un fervent défenseur de la coopération entre l'Union africaine et les Nations unies. Grâce à nos efforts conjoints, nous avons renforcé nos liens institutionnels, aligné nos stratégies et multiplié nos actions communes sur le terrain. Que ce soit dans la prévention et la résolution des conflits, la lutte contre le changement climatique, la promotion du développement durable et dans des contextes toujours difficiles, votre contribution a été inestimable. Chers amis, je tiens à vous exprimer ma profonde gratitude pour votre dévouement et votre humanité. Votre héritage perdurera bien au-delà de votre mandat, car vous avez posé les fondations d'un partenariat Union africaine, Nations unies, plus fort et plus efficace. Vous incarnez l'esprit même de coopération et de solidarité internationale, et c'est avec une grande amitié que je vous adresse mes remerciements les plus chaleureux. I am particularly happy with our session today. We have, as Chairperson Faki expressed, we have looked into how our cooperation developed during these years and how it became more than the signature of common positions, ad hoc common actions. This cooperation became an institutionalized cooperation in which all key areas of our common intervention, peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, we have common programs, common strategies, and we work together very effectively in the perspective that unites us. And the perspective that unites us is of an African continent that is able to provide to its citizens all the rights that they should enjoy, and in the context of a world able to overcome the terrible divisions that we are facing today. And I have to say that I came from the Summit of the Future with the conscience that there are now conditions for the international community to start providing justice to the African people. First of all, in relation to the questions of peace and security, there is now a consensus of member states that the Security Council must be reformed, and there is a consensus about all member states that the key aspect of that reform is to have 2 African members as permanent members of the Security Council. And on the other hand, many decisions were taken in relation to the capacity to deepen our cooperation with the African Union in areas like prevention, mediation, peace building, and the capacity to act together to address the multiple conflicts that today the African continent, as the whole world, unfortunately, are dealing with. Then, for the first time, there was the recognition that we live in an economic system and a financial system that is outdated, that is ineffective, and that is unfair. And it is especially ineffective and unfair because of the African continent. Africa faces enormous obstacles to its development. First of all, they are deeply rooted in the past, deeply rooted in the colonial legacy. And I can speak totally at ease because I come from a colonialist country. African countries gained independence with their economies and to a certain extent their societies distorted by the interests of the colonial powers that organized their economies to the benefit of the colonialists. And then the African continent has had to face an enormous number of challenges. And just recently, the COVID-19, the dramatic impacts in prices and in interest rates that were enhanced by the war in Ukraine, and the extremely difficult present situation in which many countries are drowning in debt, and many countries do not have access to the resources, namely to concessional finance, in order to not only be able to reduce their debts, but to be able to provide to their citizens those essential actions that are necessary for their lives to be lived in full dignity. And we managed finally to have in the Summit of the Future the affirmation that the international financial architecture must be corrected, and must be corrected to give more voice and more power to developing countries in general, of course African countries in particular, and to mobilize much more resources, the SDG stimulus, to reduce the debt and to create the conditions for sustainable development and for climate action in mitigation and adaptation to the benefit of developing countries. And I hope that now it will be possible to implement those measures because they are essential for justice in relation to the African continent. And then we just decided to create a common working group with the Economic Commission for Africa and the African Union Commission to do a serious research to allow, to contribute to the creation of an African strategy to bridge the digital divide and the artificial intelligence divide, and to overcome all the enormous structural difficulties and impediments that exist today, and be able to claim the resources that will be necessary for this to be possible, and for the digital world and the artificial intelligence not to be another factor of inequality, but to be a factor to allow to catch up, and for the African continent to move, as it has done in the past, more fast in development, to be able to provide the best conditions for their citizens. And we are totally committed to have a strong African presence in the political dialogue that will now be annual in the United Nations on artificial intelligence, and on the international scientific panel that will follow the developments, the state of the art of artificial intelligence. We want the African continent, that is a young continent, and in relation to sciences that are young scientists, to be able to be in the first line and not to be left behind because of the structural injustices that still today exist. In these circumstances, I'm sure that the cooperation between the UN and the United Nations, whose foundations were laid by Moussa Faki, that cooperation will remain in the future as strong, as dynamic, and as committed to the well-being of those that justify our action, the people of Africa and the people of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. We will now hear an interpretation of the statement of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission.
Due to time constraint, I will try to give the essential of the statement of the Chair. So there are three things that the Excellency mentioned. One is the work that has been done over the past 8 years between the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Chairperson of the African Union. The three framework agreements that have been signed, and His Excellency paid tribute to the personal contribution of the Secretary General to the improvement of the relations between the United Nations and the African Union, that they have brought it to a level due to the experience, the personal conviction, and the devotion of the Secretary General himself, who knows Africa very well, having been the Commissioner of the UNSCR, so therefore he knew Africa very well, and therefore he has contributed. So the African Union and United Nations work together in order to bring Africa to the fore. That is, Africa now has a voice, and it wants its voice to be heard. It has been struggling for the reform of the United Nations Security Council. It has worked for the reform of the financial institutions, and now it is a member of the G20, and this is where Africa will have to have its voice heard, though it is maybe economically still weak, but it has to progress and improve. And thanks to the cooperation that has existed with the UN Secretary General, Africa has been able to improve the relations, and therefore the foundation for the future cooperation of the new Commission that will take over has been laid down, and His Excellency hopes that this cooperation will continue and be pursued afterwards.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We would like to take your questions, but we are still available to take down your questions and to respond to you later. But for the moment, our principals have to go. So at this point, I would really like to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation in this press briefing, and also to the media who have attended this event. Thank you very much.